to the Money RX for CRNAs podcast, where you go behind the scenes with host Brett Fellows, CFP, as he explores the unique opportunities and challenges facing certified registered nurse anesthetist along the path to financial independence. In each episode, Brett shares expert insights and actionable advice, equipping you with the tools you need to take control of your financial destiny and retire on your terms. And now, here's your host, Brett Fellows.
Welcome to the Money RX for CRNAs podcast. My guest on the podcast today is Andi Stamper. Andi is a certified registered nurse anesthetist with an impressive journey that started as a licensed practical nurse and culminated in earning a Doctor of Nursing Practice from Duke University. Her story is a testament to dedication, perseverance, and the continuous pursuit of excellence in the field of healthcare. In this episode, Andi takes us on a journey through her dynamic career progression, candidly sharing the setbacks and triumphs she's encountered along the way. We explore her pivotal decision to become a 1099 contractor and delving into the myriad of challenges and exciting opportunities that self-employment introduced. Andi also sheds light on her strategic choice to structure her practice as an LLC designated as an S corporation, a savvy move she made early in her career with the invaluable guidance of a trusted mentor. Later in our conversation, Andi introduces us to her innovative side business, HealthShield Credentialing, which is a digital wallet for credentialing documents that she co-founded with Kiki Mattress. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out episode 13 to hear Kiki's story. Andi reveals the inspiration behind HealthShield, detailing its tiered subscription model and their ambitious plans for expansion, including the development of an app and the potential pursuit of investment opportunities. Throughout our discussion, Andi offers practical advice on financial management for 1099 contractors, including handling tax implications and balancing expenses. She also highlights the critical support CRNAs need due to the high-stress nature of their jobs, emphasizing the power of networking and maintaining multiple credentials to ensure a steady flow of work. From working in various healthcare settings to making the bold move to become a 1099 contractor, Andi's experiences offer invaluable insights for anyone considering a similar path. And with that, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Money RX for CRNAs podcast with special guest Andi Stamper. Welcome, Andi Stamper, to the Money RX for CRNAs podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here. And thinking about you, and I think one of the reasons why not only were we introduced to you from mutual friend Kiki Mattress, who's also on the show, but just thinking about, we always talk about how CRNAs need a lot more support because you have such a high stress type of career. And I think you come at that too, and we've got a bio for you here, but it's not necessarily just about the work that you do, especially as a 1099 CRNA, but also things like credentialing, which I never even thought of. So that type of support as well. So you've even noticed that within your own journey. So I'm really excited to have you and talk about that today.
For sure. It's something that everybody hates, but we all have to discuss.
Yeah. All right. I'll embarrass you. I'll read your bio that we took. Andi, you've practiced as a CRNA in academic institutions, community hospitals, and outpatient and office-based practices since 2000. Graduated from Duke University as a CRNA in 2012 with your DNP in 2014. You've published over 20 articles on a variety of evidence-based practices, as well as been a consultant to multiple nurse anesthesia programs. You are a traveling nurse, or currently a traveling nurse, and a 1099 CRNA. How did you get started knowing in 2012 that's what you were going to graduate with? How did you find the path of becoming a CRNA from nursing school?
It's been a long process. My family always jokes that I'm the chronic student in the household. I think I've hit every degree that there is. I started at a community college and got my licensed practical nurse degree. And that allowed me to work while I was getting my ADN or my RN degree. And then I moved to North Carolina. I always joke I followed Roy Williams there because I'm a huge Kansas basketball fan.
That's funny.
And then
I have a story about him, by the way, so I'll get you that offline.
Yes, I love him. He's absolutely has my heart.
That's so interesting.
But so I worked out there, and then there was a program that allowed you to go to a community college to get your RN to BSN for a year's time. And so I did that at night while I worked on a med surg floor. And then I just really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just thought you just were a nurse. And I worked in a small community in Reidsville, North Carolina. And there was a man there. His name was Bob Idakavich. And I saw him and we talked. I was like, what do you do? And he told me that he was a CRNA, and he said, come on down and shadow me. And so that was the very first time I'd ever heard what a CRNA was.
Yeah.
So went down and shadowed him and fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I got my ICU experience and went to Duke for my master's in nurse anesthesia, and then graduated in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
At which time I applied for their DNP program. So while I was a new grad working as a CRNA at Duke, I was also going to school to get my DNP.
Wow.
And it just was a monster that I had to
Yes, definitely.
And so I worked at Duke for 3 years. And at that time, I felt like I just wanted more. Duke has cases that nobody else does. They have a level of acuity that nobody else has. And I loved it. I worked with some great people. I got to meet the world-renowned Tim Miller and Jeff Gadsden and all of those people who really influenced my practice. But then there was a Duke alumni, Bob Whitehurst, who had been talking to me about 1099, had been telling me about it, and then had gotten me into his business over in Raleigh. And so I made the leap.
I'm curious. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What was he selling, if you will, and why was he saying makes it so unique or so valuable to think about the 1099 route?
Well, Bob is a person that truly, if you meet him, he has these ideas that are on a whole nother level, and he understands things and sees things. I keep talking about sports, but he's almost like Peyton Manning, where he can see the field and he sees it like nobody else sees it.
Yeah.
And Bob has a knack for business like I've never seen anybody else have it. And he was just so passionate about it. And he said, you can just be independent and you can be, have so much more like fulfillment.
Yes.
And so I started working for him and just never looked back.
That's great.
And so, yeah, I worked for him in Raleigh. And then, my husband and I, he got a job down in Greenville, and that's when we moved to Greenville.
Okay. Was that tough to leave, Bob, obviously, to make that move?
Very hard. It was one of the hardest things to walk in and tell Bob that I had to go with my husband. I'm sorry, Bob, but I have to go. And I kept in touch with him, and he always has advice and he'll answer any questions, and he's a great resource for anybody, and he has time for anybody that there is.
Yeah, that's a wonderful relationship. Now, I should note your husband, Matt, is also a CRNA. So I'm actually married to a CPA. So everybody gives me jokes about what we must talk about at the dinner table. So what do two CRNAs talk about at the dinner table? Is it shop all the time?
It is shop, especially when we worked at the same places. We worked together at Duke. We worked together in Greenville, and then we traveled and worked together here and there now. And especially when, not gossip about people, but just, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe what happened today. And just like, also, he's also one of the smartest people I know I'm like, what would you have done in this situation? And so I always like to get his opinion, and he does the same thing. So it's nice, but then we put it away and we talk about our dogs and baseball.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So you spent some time in South Carolina, coming down from North Carolina for a few years, and then you eventually made it back out to Kansas, as you said, maybe a few stops in between there. Were you doing just 1099? When did you start doing solely 1099 on your own?
I have been doing 1099 since 2016
Okay.
for the most part. In the 1099 world, you just never know what's going to happen. And so they always tell you keep a couple of backup plans, be credentialed with other places. And so here and there, I've had a couple PRN W-2 jobs, but for the most part, since 2016, my income has been 99% 1099.
Okay. Were you full W-2 in 2015, let's say, just to compare apples to apples?
So I will tell you, I started working for Bob a little bit here and there in 2014. So in 2014 and 15, I worked probably 25% 1099, 75% W-2.
Okay. I was curious. So when you made that mental shift, you said, oh, in some degree, you said, okay, next year, let's say, if not literally all of 2016, we're going to be all 1099. How scary was that? Were you worried about money, and did you have money saved going into it? Like, how much did you treat it? Okay, I'm starting my own business, Andi Stamper Corporation, versus it was pretty fluid.
Just like an ICU nurse will tell you once they become a CRNA, when I went 1099, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it probably ignorance is bliss because I just did it. I didn't have a huge savings. I didn't have, at the time, I wasn't married.
Hmm.
I had just bought a house.
Hmm.
And with Bob as a resource, I think I felt a little bit more comfortable doing
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
And then just did it. You just got
Yeah.
to
And how was that first year? What's the biggest mistake you made that first year in terms of managing yourself?
taxes.
Taxes. Okay. Let me
Tax.
guess. We didn't have enough set aside per se to pay as you go, or you owed a lot more that year that you didn't anticipate.
I owed a lot more than I
Yeah.
didn't anticipate. And just the things you don't know that you don't know is that you need to find someone that truly understands what you're doing.
Hmm.
And I thought that I had a good accountant at the
Yeah.
time, and
It's a relative term.
I didn't. And
Hmm.
and when I got my tax bill, it was a little bit of a, you know, stop my heart type of moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So if that was 2016 and we're talking 8 years ago, how has your practice grown from that time in terms of, are you busier now than you were then? Is your per hour a lot more than it was then? You don't have to get into specifics, but has it grown as much as you anticipated, more than you thought? What are your thoughts about that?
Really, so since COVID happened, and then I will tell you that since 2020, I've been 100% 1099,
Hmm.
that it has grown, that there's more work than I can work every day if I wanted to.
Yes.
Obviously, from when I started and doing 1099 on the side in 2014 to today, the rate has grown significantly. And that's just the demand. Everybody tells you that you just don't know when it's going to bust. And I'm probably a little bit more anxious than some people, where I think that this isn't going to last forever.
Hmm.
I want to make sure everything's paid off. But in the back of my mind, I know that they're always going to need anesthesia, so I can take a W-2 job if I.
Sure. Right. And the jobs that you currently do, are they mostly from the network you have created, and they're repeat kind of clients, or do you have job boards? How do you fill your schedule now?
Right now, I probably have 4 places that I'm credentialed at that I go to, 2 of them more regularly than the
Okay.
other 2. But it's just a cycle of people that I found that need it. And then you can just build your schedule around
Hmm.
that.
So yeah, I was curious about, as your practice growed, you probably started as a sole proprietor. And then I didn't know if you're still a sole proprietor today, or perhaps an S corporation, or file as an S corporation as your business has grown.
So again, that's where Bob comes in with all of his knowledge and everything. He had me file as an S corp right away. So it was an
Right.
LLC. It just depends on, so I had done an LLC No, I'm sorry. I've done a PLLC in North
Okay.
Carolina because there's 17 states maybe that have the PLC
Hmm.
or designation. And then when I moved to South Carolina, I opened up an LLC there. And then when we started traveling, I stayed in LLC and I just register as
Yeah.
a foreign entity in every state. But I have an LLC with an S Corp designation.
Okay. And so do you now pay yourself a salary and then take draws from a distribution, if you will, for to recoup the difference?
Yes,
Good.
yes. I pay that reasonable salary that everybody talks
The
about.
reasonable salary. Oh, yes.
Based on, I do have a very good accountant that I
Great.
trust with everything now. And he actually insists on quarterly meetings and everything so that we discuss everything and then make sure that we adjust based on my husband's W-2 income
Right.
and my nine income. So we're always
Yeah, that
adjusting
might,
things to
we in our practice every October we meet with our clients and get the pay year to date and see what we need to do by year end. And I would imagine, Jed, I have a few experiences with it, but yeah, when one's 1099 and the other's W, especially depending upon how your year goes, you could have withheld too much, you could have withheld not enough. So yeah, that's something I'm sure you guys have to pay close attention to.
Yes, for sure. And then we discuss, I have everyone makes fun of me. I have a color-coded spreadsheet.
I love that. Good. We love people like you.
I don't know. Some people don't love it, but I keep the monthly, and so we have a lot of predicted stuff to base the taxes on. Obviously, I pay monthly taxes, but then we do end up paying quarterly taxes as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's my goal. I always tell them that my goal is to be at zero. I don't want to owe and I don't want anything back. I just want to be at zero.
Good for you. And just because I like some of the topics specifically with 1099 of what you can do, I'm not picking on you specifically or just asking, do you have one of the great advantages is you can do different types of retirement plans that most people can't do. Your husband may have a 403B or a 401k, which is awesome, but you also could have your own 401k, or you could have what's called a SEP, or you could have a solo 401k, which is both. Have you had a chance yet to take advantage of anything like that?
Yes, that's another. I'm always looking for those places to decrease the tax.
Yes.
That everybody's looking at. But one area, obviously, I have my 401k and then do my contributions, my employer contributions, and all that fun stuff.
Good for you.
One of the things that we lost when we both started traveling and did 1099, we did health insurance through the marketplace.
Yes.
And so we had a high deductible plan.
Yes.
And so we were able to squirrel some stuff away with the health savings account.
Yes.
And then obviously when he went W-2, we lost that because they don't offer a high, which is
high
kind of annoying,
plan. But do they have a health plan that at least you guys can take advantage of, even though it doesn't have, like, it's more of a PPO or more of a, you're just paying regular premiums, or has is the plan not so great that you don't even want to take advantage of it?
We do have the plan and everything, but it's just not, it doesn't allow for a health savings account.
Health savings account specifically. Okay. I was curious. Well, I thought you were going to say, then we don't have one. So I got nervous. No, that's good.
Yeah. With everything, I can tell you that the amount of insurance that we have for malpractice, for health, for house, for car, for everything, we have it all.
Yes. All of which we hope we never use, but it is what it is. That's why they call it insurance. So if you've been doing this for that 12 or 13 years on your own, even just managing your cash flow as a 1099, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned over those 10 years plus?
That I completely ignore the business account. Like it's not money to spend, because when it does come to taxes and stuff like that, that's obviously where my taxes come from. So it's not like it's not an extra spending account, I
Yeah.
guess is the best way
Yeah.
for me.
That's great.
So I usually try to keep it at a certain level. And then once it gets to that level, I start sweating a little bit, even though, it's fine, but I start to sweat a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
pretend it's not there.
And along the way, you also started a labor of love, as using your words, but a side business called HealthShield Credentialing. And with Kiki Mattress, you guys did that together. You are the CEO and she's the COO. So tell me how that came about. Tell me about what HealthShield Credentialing is. I have an idea, but I probably won't do it justice explaining it. So I would love to hear about the inspiration to create that and where that sits today and what you guys are hoping to achieve.
So I've said in the past that credentialing is something that everyone hates, but we all have to do. And so one day, Kiki and I, we were in the OR, and you have to re-credential at the facilities every 2 years. And I'm like frustrated because I'm like, they have all that information, nothing has changed. There's got to be a way for people to just pull this information and it be done. And so we started talking about creating a digital wallet for all of our credentialing documents. And so back, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, most people stayed W-2. And so they had one job or two jobs. And now with the way that the market has gone and everyone's going 1099, there's a lot more paperwork to keep up with. And again, when you come out of school, you know how to give anesthesia, but you don't know how to do some certain things like credentialing or other things like that. And so you have to keep track of all your malpractice insurance for more than 10 years, your case logs for 2 years, your certificate of insurance. And so just having it in one spot is what we wanted to do, because I would be in the OR and I would say, hey, I'm going to get off at 7:00. I'll get it to you as soon as I get home. Obviously, the person that needs it is gone by 7:00. And so then we start over again the next day, where then they say, no, I need something else. And I'm like, I'm back at work. I can't give it to you. So it's just a delay.
Yeah.
And so what we did with HealthShield is we created that digital wallet so that you can keep everything there at your fingertips. And then you can just send it. You can put in the person's email address, give them access to what you want them to have access to, and then they can pull it from your profile.
Okay. So in its essence, it's just an online portal, if you will, or a wallet where you're keeping all of those credentials. And
correct.
You have obviously you can give access to third parties where they can pull it.
Yep. And so then they get an encrypted email. So then you get into the digital age where there are hackers and sending all of that information through just an email puts you at risk, puts your license at risk. There's been people that have had their identity stolen, and people have been credentialed under their name with no training.
Right.
It sends an encrypted, HealthShield sends an encrypted email, and then they can pull the stuff off of the actual profile versus sending it unsecure.
Okay.
Yep.
And is this you will have links in the show notes to HealthShield Credentialing. So how does this work? If I'm a CRNA and I want to utilize this, is it a monthly subscription? Is it a annual type of thing? How does it work? And what's the best way to go about it? Would you recommend?
Okay, what it is that we do have tiered subscriptions, and some people have more documents to store than the other person does. And so you can pick the plan that's best for you. You can pay monthly or annually.
Okay.
And then you just set up your profile how you want it.
Okay. Very cool. And what does a typical week look like for you? I'm espousing how my experience with CRNAs is how high stress and high demand that job can be, but you've also got HealthShield Credentialing. So how much of your time does HealthShield Credentialing take? Is that more self-managing versus your own practice, or you splitting 30% of your time on that per week? What's a typical week look like for you?
I do work at least 40 hours a week in anesthesia. And then, HealthShield is currently, we're in year 3. And
Hmm.
so we are currently in a phase where we want to expand it. We are looking for programs and folks to possibly invest right now in
Hmm.
order to get something that would be used by either our organization, the AANA, but used basically throughout in order to just cut the credentialing frustrations down. And
Yeah,
so develop an app and things like that.
sure.
So it's like a hurry up and wait. So hurry and
Yeah.
do all of this stuff. And it can be 40 extra hours that week on HealthShield, or I can be waiting until the next step comes and not do anything the next week, but then back to 40 hours. So it's been a crazy phase right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you enjoy one more than the other? Are you finding that the Health Shield kind of is drawing you to different fulfillment, or they're two different types of leadership qualities? So I'm curious how that works.
It is. When we started HealthShield credentialing, I think the one thing that people always said was credentialing needs to be dealt with, but you're never going to get anywhere. Like
Hmm.
it's not going to happen. You're not going to be successful. You're not going to get anywhere. And so that kind of puts me in the mentality of I like to listen to the radio personality Bobby Bones, and he always says,
Yeah.
fail until you don't. And so I'm going to keep on going because I know that this can get fixed. It's just a matter of finding the right person or the right connection that's going to
Hmm.
help me push over the edge to fix it.
So good. Like I mentioned, we'll have links to Health Shield in the show notes. So I think it's a really great vision for you and just how you manage your ideal for patient care, but also for CRNA care, just to make life simpler. So that's wonderful.
Yes, I did a stint in the academic field and everything. And so that was partly my DNP project and everything, is that we all know that
Yeah.
healthcare is this monster and this beast that is just inefficient and wasteful. And that in most of the projects that I did and students that I helped with their projects and papers that were written, efficiency is the name of the game. And that's always what I'm trying to get to, outside of anesthesia care, is
Yeah.
that we can always improve. It's just going to be who's going to be the person that finally says something to fix it.
Yeah, that's great. And you're also active in the Kansas Association. So tell me about that. Is that something that takes a lot of your time as well? Are you able to scratch the itch of Health Shield credentialing and some of those other things, even being part of the association?
Yeah, no, I have been involved in both the AANA and each state association that I've been in, or each state when I've been there, their association. And it's always interesting to see how the associations work because obviously we all know that anesthesia can be political. And so
Yeah.
it's really nice to be in Kansas specifically because Kansas is hard to describe. There's not very
Hmm.
many people there.
Hmm.
Most people either drive through it or you were born here. And so they don't understand the fact that there's not a lot of people, and the people that you do meet are most of the time the legislatures and people like that. And so it's like a really good connection
Yeah.
to be able to educate people on CRNAs and what we can do for the community.
Yeah, that's great. So I was psyched to see that you were involved in it. I definitely can see you giving back a lot to your profession. I do want to transition to your financial questions. I want to make sure we leave some time for that. You had a really good question. It was a technical question, and full disclosure, I could say go ask your CPA this one, Andy, because I am not a CPA, but I had to throw that out there for my own disclosure and my own insurance. But it was a great question. And the question was, as a 1099 contractor, what are the tax implications for housing expenses when working in a location for an extended period, specifically over a year? How can these individuals maximize their tax deductions, and what should they be aware of to remain compliant? So tell me, what spurned that question? Obviously, experience or something you're thinking about?
So again, in the current situation I live in Kansas. There's a lot of miles between facilities. And one facility that I work at, I take call at. And so I have to be within 30 minutes of the
Okay.
facility. And so my house is not within 30 minutes. So I either stay in the call room or I could get an apartment. And I know that a lot of people that I've talked to in different areas have gotten apartments and things like that, but they've also stayed at their 1099 contract for an extended period of time. So they're not
Yeah.
just doing a 3 stint or a 6 month stint. So some people are getting into that year time frame that after that time frame, it's really not, I guess, compliant or
Right.
legal deductions anymore.
Right. Yes. And I think what you're getting to, just for clarity purposes, it really depends on the time. There's what's known as temporary assignment, or there's what's known as permanent. And basically, it's 1 year. So anything less than 1 year, you can basically deduct anything, whether it's rent or food, travel, insurance, anything along that is fine because you're not changing your tax home because you still have your home as your taxable home. Any job you're doing is less than a year. So you can deduct all of those associated expenses. Once it becomes over a year, then it's triggered your tax home now becomes that new place of where you are. And then you therefore cannot deduct anything for the job related. So obviously now it's like the 1 year, and they also use the word indefinite. Indefinite is very similar to like reasonable compensation that you were mentioning before for your W-2 salary. So what's indefinite and when do I know that it's going to be permanent? So that's a gray area. But I think where there's other, so I think as long as it's less than a year, you can deduct everything and that's okay. But like you said, if there's 1099 and it's a long period job for more than a year, then I would say what I'm curious about for a CPA that I would ask with a client is, okay, if you do get that town home, I guess you'd have to, could you treat it quote unquote as your office? Meaning this is not my home. I'm renting this office space, but I get to deduct the office. I get to deduct the rent for that. But if you're not doing your business in that space, so then it's not clarified as an office. So I just answered my own question. Sorry. So yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to. So that's a
So I
really,
guess some people have said, which it would be interesting to see what you can do with your employer, that I guess take 31 days off and
okay.
then it starts over. I
Yeah.
don't know if you do a
Yeah.
contract for 31 days past that. I don't know. That's a gray area
Yeah.
that I
Yes,
didn't.
that's a really interesting question. Again, I definitely would I think that's a great question for your CPA because I just don't know enough how technical, like you say, the IRS would get is if I have a 31-day grace period, bam, and I start all over again. Am I still under that next 12-month grace period so I can deduct everything? I think you probably could. Absolutely. That's a really neat question.
Take a vacation.
Now, there's things like home office and all that. You can still always deduct whether it's temporary or permanent. But in terms of where you're living on a temporary assignment, as long as it's less than a year, you can deduct everything. If it's more than a year, then I think I would definitely recommend talking with a CPA and seeing what are the different ways one might be able to structure a contract to appease the IRS.
Right.
That
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a great
It's just
question.
one. I've seen a lot more people starting to talk about that because
Yeah.
you are getting into these, again, people forget that 1099 and W-2 is just basically how you're taxed. And you're paid differently as well. And so everybody thinks, oh, you're 1099, you can deduct everything. But
Everything.
then you
No.
start
Yeah.
things where it's like,
No,
I don't know
not at
that.
all. Yeah. No, you're very smart. So as you think, just some questions as we start to wrap up. Uh, what do you know today? All you've learned as a being an independent contractor, your own business, starting HealthShield Credentialing. What do you know today you wish you'd known 15 years ago?
Sometimes I think it sounds cynical, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but you're replaceable.
Yeah.
And in most cases, it doesn't matter who you are, but the bottom line is money to these institutions. And so you're the only one that's going to be an advocate for yourself. And so knowing that and seeing that in a lot of these places, that's really triggered me to be that I need to be an advocate for myself and my patient. And so people are trying to push, we've got to go to the next case. We've got to talk about the next case. You really just focus on what's happening right then and there. And that's the patient you're going to take care of. And it's okay to say no, because at the end of the day, you're replaceable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
What's been the low point for you along this whole journey?
One assignment I took was 3 months worth of living in a hotel where
Wow.
I didn't know if we were going to make it to the end of the 3 months.
Yeah.
It was in a place that was just, what people don't realize when you do go 1099 and you're not necessarily chasing the big bucks, but you're chasing, for us, we were chasing a location at the time. And so we took a job, and these people that need help aren't necessarily treating their employees. So we experienced that for 3 months, and it was awful.
Yeah. This podcast is meant to be about success for people in the CRNA community. What we know and have learned, of course, is that success means different things to different people. So I'm curious, Andi, as you think about your 1099 practice, HealthShield Credentialing, all that you're doing in Kansas, what would your definition of success mean to you?
It's funny. I've listened to some past episodes, and I think that everybody says that one of the same themes is that success is different in every different stage of life for people. So when I was a new grad, success for me was handing or doing major cases at Duke, providing anesthesia there at a prestigious university, and doing groundbreaking surgeries. And at that time, my career achievements defined my success. And so now, looking 12 years later in a new different phase of life, my perspective has shifted. We often hear about the importance of work-life balance, and I found that to be incredibly true. In anesthesia right now, the success for me is being able to provide individualized care for patients, listen to my patients, and help them to have a positive experience. But on a personal level, success has evolved into finding the thing that makes you happy. And when I say happiness, discovering what is truly your passion inside of you and what brings you joy. And for some, that's family, for some, that's job or a hobby. But I think that true success is finding those things that genuinely make you happy and fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. Well, Andi Stamper, thank you for being a guest on this episode of Money RX for CRNAs.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome to talk to you.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. This podcast does not engage in rendering legal, financial, or other professional services.